Hi, I'm Ken Fisher. Welcome to the 18th season of CityWide. My guest on this edition of CityWide is State Senator Eric Adams, who on January 1st will become the new Brooklyn Borough President. Congratulations on your election victory. Welcome to CityWide.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate being here. You know you have arrived when you get a cup named after your show.
Yeah, but after budget cuts, we don't give them to the guests anymore. Eric, September 2012, in this studio, we taped a show that aired on the first anniversary of the terrible attack at the World Trade Center. You were a police captain at the time, community leader, involved with civil rights. We talked about the first responders and what they had done on that day. We also talked about your concerns about New York's open and diverse society and how it would change as a result of the fear that had been injected by the attack. 11 years almost to the day later, you win a primary to become the borough president of Brooklyn, token opposition. You've gone on to win the general election, again with no real opposition. For our viewers that don't know you outside of Brooklyn, tell us the journey that took you from being a cop on the street to somebody who's going to be leading Brooklyn Borough Hall.
Well, I think it goes further back than that. I'm the paper boy, had a route in South Jamaica, Queens. My mother was able to iron clothing, and do days cleaning to move us out of Brooklyn, Gates Avenue, 1218 Gates Avenue. And we moved to Queens, where we had a house with a backyard. I used to run errands like every other child, Little League, baseball, and play the sports, went to Bayside High School. Went to school at night because we couldn't afford to go during the day. It took me 14 years to finally get my master's degree after graduating from New York City College of Technology, then to John Jay College, and eventually I went on to Marist College. And during that same time, I studied to become a professional in a career that I adored. I used to sleep with a police officer hat because I just thought, police officers and law enforcement meant a lot. And I studied to become a sergeant, then a lieutenant, and probably one of the proudest days of my life is when I became a captain in the New York City Police Department. And at the same time, I loved the department a lot. And when you love something, you're true to it. And we started an organization called 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. And we were critical of abusive police tactics. And sometimes people didn't view that as favorable. But I think history has really shown that we were in the right direction when you look at some of the draconian measures that we did around stop and frisk. And so then after that, we went on to run for state senate. We run about 78% of the vote. After 7 years in the state senate, the people of the borough of Brooklyn decided that they want me to be their next borough president. And I'm extremely happy to have that position.
So what are you going to do the first day you're in office?
Probably just sit down for a moment and absorb that beautiful building. Borough Hall is a beautiful place, and I think it's a place where Brooklynites must understand not to be intimidated by the height, the sound, the width, and how it has such a pristine look to it. It must have a welcome mat that all Brooklynites can feel as though this is home. That is the people's house, and I'm going to just spend a moment just walking through the people's house and familiarizing myself with the sounds, the feels, the touch, and just the atmosphere that many great people have walked through Brooklyn Borough Hall throughout the years, and I want to join the legacy of those names.
There's a book written about the 1950s called When Brooklyn Was the World, when it seemed like every celebrity, Barbara Streisand, was coming from Brooklyn, where the jobs were, the talent was, and the like. It seems like Brooklyn is the world once again. You're taking office at a time when the brand hasn't been as powerful as this is in 50 or 60 years.
It's amazing. It's amazing when you think about it. I policed a lot in Brooklyn, Greenpoint, Williamsburg, Crown Heights, Flatbush, Clinton Hill. So I know how much the community has changed. You know, I wore a bulletproof vest for 22 years, and I stood on street corners protecting children and families, and I watched the changing of the communities. And so the brand is great, but you know, we have to be clear. The popularity of the brand must turn into prosperity for all Brooklynites. There's still a very sad reality that lives in the shadows of these great buildings and great structures. It's wonderful to have the Barclays Center and Barbra Streisand comes and sing, but the reality is we cannot judge our legacy based on the buildings. We have to build people. We have to invest in people that people can believe in themselves. We still have a borough that 24% of Brooklynites are living in poverty. We have double-digit unemployment, you know, so it's great that Eric Adams is becoming borough president, and I'm becoming the first person of color to be borough president. But it's not about creed, it's about deed. I must do the right things for Brooklynite and give them the hope and belief that their families, too, can participate in the growth of the borough.
One of the things I give Marty Markowitz a lot of credit for, he was exactly the borough president he told people he was going to be. He was going to be a cheerleader. He was going to wave the Brooklyn flag as loud and as proudly as he could. And I think that that was important, sort of lifting people's spirits up, particularly after September 11th. But I've heard you talk over the course of the campaign about the fact that the prosperity can't just be between the Barclays Center and the East River. That band along from Greenpoint to Red Hook, where a lot of the development is taking place, where a lot of the new jobs are being created. What is it that the rest of Brooklyn needs? How do we get that 24% poverty number down? What kind of strategies do you plan on pursuing?
Well, there are a number of things, and my goal is really to invest in people. And I agree with you. Marty has done a great job as borough president. He did not allow his heart to get in the way of his eyes. He saw what the borough could become, and I think that we are all in a better place because of that. But there used to be a commercial, I remember as a child, when a car would drive by, an Oldsmobile, they said, "This is not your dad's Oldsmobile. This is not our dad's Brooklyn. This is a new Brooklyn." It's a tech giant. The technology of NYU is there. Some of the development that's taking place in Sunset Park with Andrew Kimball is over there now. Williamsburg and Greenpoint. We just sold a condominium in Brooklyn for $1.3 million. So it's a different place. And I must be aggressive in building people. And so I want to look at things like financial literacy. Mm-hmm. Teaching people how to manage their money better, how to save for college, how to ensure that you can go from renting a home to purchasing a home. Teaming with the banks, coming in and really teaching people how to raise their credit scores so they could become financially sound. I want to look at healthy foods. We are being harmed in a great way around preventable diseases, food-related diseases, hypertension, diabetes, heart disorders. So I want access to healthy food. We shouldn't have one major food co-op on 7th Avenue and Union Street and Park Slope. We could have farmers market more than Grand Army Plaza. It shouldn't take a darn Grand Army to bring down apples from the northern part of the state. And so I want to look at rooftop gardens. And I'm not talking about just growing tomatoes, about having a project. There are major projects taking place in Brooklyn where we're growing fresh fruits and vegetables that we can use. Then I want to make the borough a senior-friendly borough. Teaching seniors transitional services, protecting seniors from domestic abuse, protecting them from the victims of fraudulent attacks on seniors, and making sure that they have great transitional services. And lastly, jobs. We got to bring jobs to the borough. Jobs in a non-traditional sense. I want to attract people like the 3D printer developer, MakerBot, that's in Sunset Park. Bring them out to Brownsville, some of those non-traditional areas, and come up with, team up with the mayor, I was going to say Bloomberg, but Mayor de Blasio, right, and talk about how do we attract business with tax incentives, something similar to what what the governor has done about developing on SUNY and CUNY campuses, why can't we have development in communities that have certain indicators, high unemployment, high crime, high poverty? So I want to attract employment.
Well, what about the SUNY downstate campus? I have a little bit of involvement with it, but you've got a SUNY campus. The governor's plan says basically if you start a business that's on the campus or associated with it, I think SUNY has some land, no state taxes for the business or its employees for 10 years, 10-year period. Can SUNY downstate be a new hub for economic development in central Brooklyn?
I don't know. We have the hospital, SUNY Downstate Hospital. That area is going to do fine. That is part of the gentrification wave. It's going to do great. When you look at the Clarkson Avenue, New York Avenue, and that region is going to do fine. We have to go to those areas that, for whatever reason, had a difficult time turning around. The Brownsvilles, the East New York. We have to attract families there and also use what I believe is a tool that we don't use often. We have to use our artists. If you look, wherever artists go, if it's Dumbo, Soho, they build communities based on their value to a community and their artistic approach. And what do? Once they build a community, we throw them out. I say allow them to go to the Brownsvilles of Brooklyn and team up with on-the-ground organizations and groups and teach young people how to develop their full personhood by using art, by using academics, improve our schools, our after-school programs. We close these buildings at 3 o'clock instead of allowing them to be focal points for an entire community.
You know, that was actually a program under Giuliani, the Beacon Schools. Keep the schools open until 8, 9 o'clock at night, social services for the parents, literacy classes, and a place for kids to get homework help or blow off steam. It was actually Rudy Giuliani that funded a lot of those schools, and they fell off the chart with Mike Bloomberg.
Big mistake, and I think that sometimes Mayor Bloomberg didn't understand some of the roles that government was supposed to play. And he saw it as just social programs and we should ignore it. No, young people need alternative places to go. And we're not building and raising robots. We're raising children that must be able to develop their full personhood. And all across the globe, nowhere else are we teaching children, are they teaching their children just to be able to check off a box on an exam. They're learning multiple languages. They're learning how to speak more than one language. There's a reason Chinese students are learning how to speak English. And they're learning the artistic value of learning how to live together. Something else is happening in Brooklyn that shows that we can't create robots. We have a 50% increase in hate crimes in the borough. A borough as diverse as Brooklyn, 47% of Brooklynites speak a language other than English, yet we're seeing an increase in hate crimes. That's unacceptable. It's because we have allowed the borough to live in sections instead of saying we're one Brooklyn. We must live together, we must worship together and respect each other's right to go to different houses of worship, but we must have the right to live in Brooklyn in a very peaceful manner.
We'll talk more about strategies for the future of Brooklyn when Citywide continues right after this. Welcome back to Citywide. We're speaking with Eric Adams, about to become the Borough President of Brooklyn, Borough President-elect. Eric, you have been in the State Senate since 2006, not without some controversy, sometimes involving issues, but also sometimes the controversy has just been about Eric Adams. Closely associated with John Sampson, the former Senate Democratic leader who's under indictment now, and you yourself hit the headlines, I guess I would put it, because another state senator was recording conversations of people who were suspected of improper activities. You were one of the people on the tape. So why do you find yourself in these positions? You got anything to worry about?
No, and I've made that clear when it was revealed that Senator Huntley was taping some of her colleagues. Velmanette Montgomery, for God's sake, we call her the patron saint of the Senate. And there's not much you can do about that. Not only am I a good friend of John Sampson, I'm a good friend of all 63 of the senators on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats. This is how I've always been, and I'm not going to become jaded based on the behavior of a person who was under indictment, and I thought I was being a friend of sitting down and hearing her during a very difficult period. And remember, Ken, this is what I did all my life. As a police officer and with the Guardians Association and 100 Blacks, I would visit people who were in trouble. I would speak with them and hear how I could help them navigate the challenges of the criminal justice system. So it was not surprising to me when Senator Huntley asked me to stop by her home to speak with her. I thought I was being the person that Eric Adams has always been. And I said it from the first day, that there's nothing on those tapes that would incriminate me in any wrongdoing. I did not go to Albany after spending 22 years of enforcing the law to go to Albany to break the law. That is not why I'm there. I was a very strong advocate for social justice and for change, and I'm going to continue that advocacy in Borough Hall.
So I've been around for a while, and I have to tell you that even I have been surprised at the extent of the number of elected officials who have gotten in trouble in just the last 2 years. We've had waves of scandals in the 80s and others more recently, but the number of city council members, state legislators, even Republicans who have no power in the city of New York, some of their party leaders caught up in it. Is there just something wrong with the political culture these days?
No, I don't think so. You know, the question is always, I remember my speech teacher tells me, Eric, wherever you place the accent is how you're going to define the term. And so if you place it in the wrong place, you're going to define it wrongly. People look at those who have gotten in trouble. There are countless number of men and women in government who are doing the right thing every day. You know, I did not feel bad when some of my officers and colleagues in policing were arrested for selling drugs or for being overly abusive or for being involved in domestic violence or driving while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. I did not tarnish the shield or entire blue uniform because of the action of the numerical minority. The countless number of police officers are good. The countless number of teachers are good, regardless of those who are caught up in sexual scandals or in cheating on exams. Our educators are doing a great job. Our firefighters, regardless of those who set fires and then call police officers. Don't tarnish the occupation based on the actions of those who do wrong. And I've came from a career where before you state someone is guilty of a crime, you go through the proper criminal justice system. And so I'm troubled when I see some of my colleagues caught up in the criminal justice system. But I also know that I interact with a lot of men and women that are in government all across the country that are doing a great job, and they will continue to do the great job, no matter what is the outcome of those who did something wrong.
So let me draw on your expertise for a minute. You know, you think about the city today, there's a common phrase that there are no bad neighborhoods anymore. The sense of menace that we had all through the 90s largely dissipated. But not every neighborhood has benefited from the drop in crime to the same extent. And if my recollection is correct, 2 or I think maybe 3 of the precincts with the highest felony rates in the city of New York are in Brooklyn. And when you look at those neighborhoods and other pockets of crime, it seems to me that there is, when they say there's no bad neighborhoods in New York anymore, there's one exception, and those are the NYCHA housing projects. If you think of the big housing developments, all of those buildings, usually somewhat isolated from the areas around them, those are the bad neighborhoods in New York now. So what do you do about that? How do you bring crime down in the precincts in Brooklyn that have stubbornly resisted that, where innocent people are still being killed? And in particular, what do you do about public housing where no matter what happens, whether the buildings are repaired or not repaired, the social conditions of the people don't seem to change?
Number one, by being bold. One of the well-kept secrets of turning around Bedford-Stuyvesant and parts of South Queens was a program called Officer Next Door program. It was financed by HUD and the federal government. It was a national program. It allowed police officers, teachers, firefighters, and certain other civil servants to move into a house in a blighted area for 50% of the cost. When our cop moved on the block, he changed the block. When our firefighter moved on the block, he or she changed the block. moving middle-class families into communities that have high unemployment, high rates of dropout, high rates of crime. By moving middle-class families, allowing them to be pioneers, to move into these communities at a reduced rate, and at the same time give them an opportunity to save and one day be able to purchase a home in those communities can change it.
But doesn't that then lead to claims of gentrification? That's one of the things that neighborhoods that, particularly communities of color, when they start to turn around, new people move in, and the price of everything goes up. Then people say they're being displaced.
Yeah, but see, gentrification is not an ethnicity, it's a mindset. It's when someone moves into a community, in my belief, and you want to displace the people who are there, not only physically, the human being, but the cultural norms in that community instead of adding to that community. And so when you move in the teacher, the firefighter, and other groups into a community and allow them to be part of that community and make sure that their role there, you're going to get that 50% decrease in rent, but here's some of the obligation and responsibility. Have a youth center. You have to spearhead some type of project of tutorial services if you're a teacher. Be part of the community block watch if you're a police officer. Talk about fire safety if you're a firefighter. Get the community and the civil servants involved. When you don't have gainfully employed civil servants or other servants, public service employees in a community, and you only have a community that's high unemployment, high dropout, high felony recidivist rate, and then you ask what's wrong with the community, is because you have concentrated a community with people that have certain issues that no one is resolving those issues.
So would you apply that also to public housing? Would you have some, there's not a lot of turnover in public housing, but there's some every year. Would you have those civil servants, those first responders get first dibs on those apartments too?
I wouldn't say necessarily first dibs, but proportionally. And the program started at one time under Giuliani, but it was abandoned some years later, where officers and firefighters were allowed to move into public housing for a reduced rate and provide some form of services while they were there. It was a great idea. It was a great way of dealing with the issue of crime. Public housing is a main issue in our community. We have to look at some of the families who have three-family apartments, three-bedroom apartments, have to downsize once the family move on so the next family is allowed to come in. And then we should be creative to allow money to go into an escrow so that families that are in public housing one day won't have a permanent jail sentence that they can never move in their life, that they could one day have a down payment to pay for a co-op or condominium or some way of moving on with their lives. Public housing was never supposed to be a place where you're supposed to stay. It was a place for you to start the process, get on your feet, and then move on to the next level. And we turned it into a different place.
So we're going to have a mayor from Brooklyn. I think Abe Beame was still living in Brooklyn when he became mayor in 1973. Well, somebody said he was actually living in Queens at the time, but Bill de Blasio is preparing to assume that role. What's your take on him? What's your working relationship with him?
I like Mayor-elect de Blasio a lot. His beautiful family, his two son and daughter. Not only that, we have a public advocate that's coming from Brooklyn. We have the first person of color that's going to be district attorney.
Letitia James.
Exactly.
Ken Thompson.
Ken Thompson, and of course, what's happening with me. I think that we're in a good place. I think several years ago, around the 1800s, when we fell under New York City, we became the little brother of New York City. We saw this year Brooklyn grow up. Brooklyn is now an adult, able to move forward, and is leading the city on the diversity issue. When you look at the diversity of the borough, we have the largest Chinese population in Sunset Park. We have one of the largest Russian communities in Brighton Beach. So Bill de Blasio is coming with that energy of understanding, just as I say one Brooklyn, he said one New York. We can't have two cities. That is not the way we want this city to move forward.
So not that long ago, if I remember correctly, New York Magazine, or the New Yorker maybe it was, had an article, Brooklyn is done, right? that, you know, or Yogi Bear would say, it's so crowded nobody wants to go there anymore. So have we reached the crest or just another plateau? What does Brooklyn have ahead?
We have not started. Brooklyn is on to a place. We have become the Captain Kirks. We're going into a universe that no one knew existed. We're going where no man has gone before. This is a great borough with a great tradition, everything from the first real civil rights victory with Jackie Robinson on the ball field to whatever the future holds for us. We're in a good place, and we have not started to reach our greatness.
My thanks to State Senator Eric Adams, the Brooklyn Borough President-elect. I'm Ken Fisher. Thank you for joining us on this edition of CityWide. Send your comments and suggestions to CityWide at CUNY-TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or contact us at CUNY.TV.